When he left the house, he took nothing with him. No phone, no wallet, no keys. He didn't even lock the door. And he never came back. When he left the house, he didn't take anything with him. No phone, no wallet, no keys. He didn't even lock the door. His name was Aaron Cole, 41 years old, single. Worked as a delivery supervisor for a regional warehouse. He lived alone and followed the same routine every day. On the morning he disappeared, nothing was out of place. The bed was made, the television was off, the coffee maker was still warm. Neighbors saw Aaron step outside just after 6:30 a.m. He wasn't dressed for work, he wasn't dressed for weather, he was wearing what he slept in. One neighbor waved. Aaron didn't respond. Police were notified when Aaron failed to show up for work. His employer called his sister. His sister went to the house. The door was still open. When investigators first stepped inside the house, they were met with a profound and unsettling silence. The air was still, carrying the faint, neutral scent of a space recently lived in, but now unnervingly quiet. It was the kind of quiet that feels heavier than mere absence of sound. Gap. At first glance, everything was exactly where it should have been. A home paused in the middle of a perfectly ordinary evening. The television was off. A book lay face down on the arm of a sofa, a silent bookmark holding a place that might never be returned to. There was a palpable sense of order, a domestic tranquility that seemed to mock the very reason for the intrusion. Each object sat in its designated place, a testament to a routine that had been abruptly and invisibly shattered. It was a scene of perfect normalcy, and that was the most abnormal thing about it. In the bedroom, the scene was just as serene. The bed was neatly made, the pillows plumped, and on the nightstand, a small beacon of modern life sat undisturbed. The phone was charging, its screen was dark, a black mirror reflecting the dim light of the room. It was plugged in, dutifully collecting power for a day that its owner might not participate in. Investigators noted the detail with a growing sense of unease. People don't leave their phones behind, not willingly. It's a lifeline, a connection to the world, a repository of secrets and schedules. To see it left here, charging, suggested an intention to return, or perhaps an interruption so sudden, so final, that grabbing it was not an option. A few feet away, the wallet was on the dresser. Another essential item, left behind. Inside, a driver's license, credit cards, a small amount of cash. The entire architecture of a person's identity resting on the polished wood surface. Like the phone, its presence here argued against a planned departure. You don't walk away from your life without the keys to your own identity. Gap. Unless you aren't the one who chose to walk away. The wallet wasn't tossed aside, it was placed as if at the end of a long day. And by the front door, the shoes were lined up neatly. A pair of worn sneakers and formal work shoes side by side. They spoke of a life of routine and responsibility, of journeys taken and a final return home. They were waiting for their next trip, poised for a departure that never occurred. The scene was a portrait of domesticity, frozen in time. As the search continued, the initial feeling of unease solidified into a chilling certainty. There was no sign of a struggle. No frantic, violent energy had been unleashed in this space. The meticulous order of the house was absolute. There was no broken furniture. No chairs overturned, no lamps shattered. A glass of water sat on a coaster without a single drop spilled on the table beside it. Everything was intact, preserved as if in a museum exhibit of a life. And most importantly, there was no blood. The floors were clean, the carpets unmarked. The walls were pristine. The absence of violence was a void, a silent scream in the heart of the mystery. It suggested something far more terrifying than a simple fight. It suggested a person who was there one moment and simply gone the next. Vanished from a locked room, leaving only perfect, haunting stillness behind. No disturbance. Investigators assumed Aaron had stepped outside briefly, maybe confused, maybe disoriented, maybe planning to return. But he never did. Search teams combed the area, fields, roads, nearby woods, nothing. Security cameras showed Aaron walking down the street, barefoot, moving slowly, not running, not looking around. He never turned back. There were no additional sightings, no camera footage beyond that point, no confirmed interactions. Cell phone records showed no activity. Beat. The phone never left the house. Bank accounts remained untouched. Days passed, then weeks. Psychologists suggested sleepwalking, stress-related dissociation, temporary confusion. But none of those explanations fit one detail. The street was asleep. A quiet, unremarkable collection of houses, each one a container of dreams and routines. In the pre-dawn stillness, under the dim glow of the streetlights, everything appeared normal. But in the house at the end of the cul-de-sac, a simple, mundane event was about to become the focal point of an impossible question. It began, as most things do, with a door. Gap. The first report was simple, a routine call. A man locked out of his own home. Aaron had left for his early morning run, just as he did every Tuesday and Thursday. He told the responding officers that he had locked the front door behind him. A standard deadbolt. He remembered the familiar, satisfying clunk of the bolt sliding into place. It was a muscle memory, an unconscious ritual performed thousands of times. He was certain. Gap. But certainty has a way of dissolving when confronted with the inexplicable. When he returned, key in hand, he found it wouldn't turn. The lock was engaged, yes, but it was different. It felt seized, frozen, as if it had been locked again from the outside by a key that wasn't his. The door had been relocked from the outside. That was the initial theory. A prank, perhaps, or something more malicious. The locksmith who was called to the scene confirmed the deadbolt was fully thrown. There were no signs of tampering, no scratches on the lock cylinder, no marks on the doorframe. It was pristine. The house was secured, perfectly, impenetrably. Gap. And that's where the story should have ended. A frustrating, expensive morning, a spare key and a lesson learned. But there was one detail that didn't fit. Aaron lived alone. No one else had a key. There were no hidden spares. And the small, inexpensive security camera he'd installed above the door a year prior had been recording the entire time. No one could explain how. The question hung in the air, heavy and cold. How could a door be locked from the outside with no key, no person, and no trace? The footage was supposed to provide an answer. Instead, it presented a paradox. Gap. At the station, detectives watched the small, grainy monitor. The playback was slow, methodical. They had already seen it a dozen times, each viewing deepening the mystery rather than solving it. They were looking for the detail they had missed. A shadow, a reflection in the window, a piece of string. Anything. Police reviewed the footage again. Gap. There. 5:14 a.m. Aaron exited, pulling the door closed behind him. It didn't latch immediately, resting against the frame for a moment before clicking shut. He walks out of frame. The porch is empty. The street is silent. Gap. The door closed. Gap. And seconds later, with no human interaction, no visible mechanism, the deadbolt knob on the exterior turned. A slow, deliberate rotation of 90 degrees. The sound, barely audible on the camera's low-fidelity microphone, was a faint, dry scrape of metal on metal. The lock engaged. The house was sealed. And the footage just kept rolling, recording the quiet, empty porch, guarding a secret it refused to explain. Aaron was never seen again. No remains, no trace, no explanation. His case was eventually classified as voluntary disappearance. Despite the lack of evidence, despite the locked door. In the days following Aaron's disappearance, investigators worked tirelessly, piecing together a timeline from fragments of digital evidence and witness accounts. They were building a logical sequence of events, a rational explanation for how a man could simply vanish from his own home in the dead of night. But then, they spoke to his sister, and what she told them introduced an element that defied logic, something that couldn't be mapped onto a timeline or entered into an evidence log. His sister later said something that deeply unsettled investigators. She described Aaron not as a man in crisis or a man with enemies, but as someone who carried a quiet, peculiar anxiety. It wasn't a fear of people or of any tangible threat. It was something more abstract, more atmospheric. She said Aaron used to talk about a feeling. A strange and persistent intuition he'd had since childhood, one that he rarely spoke of, and only in hushed, almost confessional tones. He called it a sense of wrong timing. He believed there were certain moments, fleeting and unpredictable, when the world outside his door was not as it seemed. A brief window when the ordinary rules of existence were temporarily suspended. For him, the simple act of crossing the threshold from inside to outside was fraught with a kind of existential peril that no one else could understand. It was a feeling that if he ever stepped outside at the wrong moment, he wouldn't be allowed back in. It wasn't about a locked door or a forgotten key. His fear was more profound. He described it to his sister as a change in the very fabric of his home. The house would no longer recognize him. The lock would not yield, the windows would not break, the walls would become an impenetrable barrier. He would be locked out not by a mechanism, but by the place itself. He would be rendered a permanent outsider, left to wander in a world that was identical to the one he had just left, but with one crucial difference. His home, his sanctuary, would be irrevocably sealed off from him. He would be able to see it, to stand on the lawn he had mowed 1,000 times, to look at the porch light he had left on, but he would be fundamentally and forever exiled from it. A ghost haunting the edges of his own life. Investigators noted the account, filed it away as the strange but ultimately irrelevant rambling of a grieving sibling. It was a piece of folklore, a family ghost story. But as every logical lead turned into a dead end, as the digital breadcrumbs vanished and the timeline dissolved into uncertainty, they found themselves returning to her words. They thought of Aaron, barefoot on the cold pavement in the pre-dawn quiet, and they were forced to consider the impossible. That perhaps he had finally stepped outside at the wrong moment. The case remains open, and the house remains empty. The door is still locked,